We're back with new details from the January 6th investigation, revealing that Trump's attempted coup started a lot earlier than we initially thought. In fact, it started just hours after Election Day. The GOP lawmaker texting Mark Meadows on November 4th about a, quote, aggressive strategy to overturn the election.
On November 4th, a member of this body wrote to Meadows, "Here's an aggressive strategy." One day after the election, why can't the states of Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and other Republican-controlled state houses declare this is BS, where conflicts in election not called that night, and just send their own electors to vote and have it go to the SCOTUS, the Supreme Court of the United States?
Just a few days later, on November 7th, Mark Meadows sent an email about a plot, quote, discussing the appointment of an alternate slate of electors as part of a, quote, direct and collateral attack on the election. Then on November 9th, there was a secret meeting at Trump headquarters featuring GOP lawmakers and White House officials. The group's strategy? Hammer home the idea the election was tainted, announce legal action, and bolster the case with fraud allegations. That same day, Trump's press secretary made the plan public.
This election is not over. Far from it. We have only begun the process of obtaining an accurate, honest vote count.
We now know Trump's attempt to overturn the election started just hours after the last votes were cast, reaching its devastating conclusion and deadly conclusion on January 6th. How can America stop the next coup? And why the heck aren't these people responsible for it already in jail? Joining me now is journalist Sarah Kendzior. She's author of the 2020 book, Hiding in Plain Sight, The Invention of Donald Trump and the Erosion of America, and MSNBC terrorism analyst Malcolm Nance. Thank you all so very much for joining me this evening. Sarah, I'll start with you. We now know that this coup attempt, it started right after the election. It probably started beforehand. They already had a plan in place. I want to start with you on this. You have been consistent and one of the loudest voices out there about the failures of Merrick Garland and the Department of Justice to be aggressive about these individuals. Just take us through just a little bit of your timeline as to what Merrick Garland has failed to do so far, especially in the face of this newfound evidence.
Well, Merrick Garland should have been prepared, because I want to take the timeline a little further back, which is that this plan had actually been in the works for the 2016 election. That is when Roger Stone coined the phrase, "stop the steal." That is when Roger Stone promised a bloodbath if Trump were not installed as president. And they made these threats consistently for the 4 years that he was in office. And so there is plenty of evidence in the public domain, generally speaking, about their tactics. There's also plenty of evidence throughout 2020 about specific actions they are going to take. Michael Flynn was calling for a coup. Lynn Wood was recruiting insurrectionists off the internet. This was all happening in plain sight. The day before January 6th, Steve Bannon announced the coup on his podcast. Like, this is extremely easy to find out. And that is why when the House impeached Trump in February, they were able to rely exclusively on public domain evidence and did not call witnesses. Perhaps they should have. They could have gotten Mark Meadows' wonderful PowerPoint back then. But yes, Merrick Garland, an experienced professional, could have gone right into this, aggressively making sure that our country is not attacked again in this fashion. Instead, he has done basically nothing but allow Trump and his crime cult to run out the clock, which has been the tactic that Trump has used with his goon squad of lawyers for the last 40 years. So none of this should have come as a surprise to anybody.
Malcolm, after hearing what Sarah just said, I don't have a tremendous amount of confidence in this administration being aggressive at hunting down these people who are terrorists. With your particular experience, if you found a PowerPoint, right? If you found a PowerPoint for people who attempted to overthrow a government, I don't care if you were in the Middle East, if you were in somewhere in Africa or somewhere in Asia, you found a whole PowerPoint. Wouldn't your first thought be, well, if there's this PowerPoint, there's probably another one out there for the next time they're going to try this? What do you think is likely still out there if we've already found this kind of information for what these Republicans are planning to do in 2022 and 2024?
You know, it's interesting. I've actually been in that circumstance where, with the U.S. intelligence agency, where we actually intercepted plans of a terrorist plot in action, in motion. we mobilized 3 commands across the region, the entirety of European Command, the entirety of Special Operations Command. I mean, we move resources when we know something is about to happen. We try to do disruptive, counteraction. I'm not seeing that from the United States government. I think what we're seeing now is January 6th is being seen as a point where the FBI is going out and trying to collect a lot of data against a lot of individuals, but many of these are very low-grade arrests. We're seeing the judiciary is actually being quite mild with them. They're letting people go on vacations. They're letting one guy retain his gun to protect the church. That being said, what we could be doing, certainly, and I hope that the Justice Department is doing it, we're seeing no evidence of it, of course, is understanding that the nation is under direct attack. We're all going back today over this timeline of November 4th. Well, a year ago, when I came out and predicted that we were actually en route to a major insurgency, which started with the insurrection. And insurgency is multiple operations, but it's also political and paramilitary. We started seeing paramilitary training for this of many of the people who have been indicted in September and October of 2020. And now we're seeing the bridge to the political component of this connect. What's missing here is the actual conspiracy. And we have a PowerPoint on how they expected to execute it. We just need to get the orders. This is where Merrick Garland should be mobilizing the Justice Department to defend the nation from future threats, because the coup is underway. The coup attempt is still underway.
Sarah, I want to play some sound from a U.S. representative who is talking about continuing this coup, and get your thoughts on the other side. This is Representative Louis Gohmert.
In effect, the ruling would be that you got to go to the streets and be as violent as Antifa and BLM.
So, look, this is 5 days before the attack. We're hearing this sort of thing. Sarah, I guess my concern is with all of this evidence that we're hearing now, we are coming up, we're closer to the 1-year anniversary of this attack than we are to when it happened. And we have all this documentation. We have all this video from people saying, yes, engage in this behavior. We have text messages. We have smoke signals. We have passenger pigeons. We have a freaking bat signal in the sky with a big old T that says, take over the government. I guess my question for you is, when you see video like this, do you think any of these Republicans are actually scared at this point? Or has the fecklessness and impotence of the DOJ and this administration so far emboldened them to continue with what they were trying to do earlier this year?
They're absolutely emboldened. They were emboldened going in because nobody held Trump accountable for the 4 years he was in office, or the 40 years before that when he was a career criminal backed up by various mafiosos. And so they're flaunting their impunity, and that frightens people. It draws Americans into their fold. It makes them seem like they too may be protected if they engage in these sort of actions. That's why you had all those low-level operatives, recruited by people like Flynn and Wood, willing to attack the Capitol in broad daylight, have it aired on national TV, have it live streamed on the internet. All of this was open, and that somehow gives people the impression that it's not illegal, that it's not treasonous, that it's not sedition. It is still sedition if it is in plain sight. That doesn't change what actually happened. What you need, though, what Merrick Garland should be doing is going to the top. These low-level QAnon folks and whatnot, a lot of them got conned into participating into this. These high-level operators, people like Roger Stone and Michael Flynn, and of course Trump himself, have been at this for years, and they are heading for a comeback. They are trying for coup 2, now with more bloodbath. And that is something that this nation must do everything in its power to prevent. And it's very interesting to me that they're not. What it looks like to me now with all these faux revelations emerging is that they are feigning shock to avoid accountability, because they should have been holding them accountable all year long.
I completely agree, and it's crazy to me, the insistence that we should be happy with them bringing in all these red shirts when we know the commanders are still behind the desk controlling this and looking for their next plan. Sarah Kendzior and Malcolm Nance, thank you all so much for joining us on The Beat this evening.